Hi, this is Steve Smith from The Vapors. And you're listening to the New Wave Music Podcast.
Welcome back to the New Wave Music Podcast. This is Steve, and before we begin, I want to give a shout out to our listeners in Portland, Oregon. We really appreciate you listening. Well, boys and girls, today's episode, I'm joined by a guest whose iconic voice was behind such hits as Kajagoogoo's Too Shy. And perhaps he is best known for the theme song for The Never-Ending Story. Today, my guest is Limahl. Limahl, thank you so much for joining us here on the New Wave Music Podcast. It's great to be speaking with you.
Hey, Steve. Great to be here.
My first question I have for you, and you probably have been asked this 100 times, so I'm going to ask this 101, is how did you come up with the name Limahl?
Oh, okay. That's an easy one. First of all, I thought I thought you had to have a stage name if you're going into show business. Even music business, I thought Sting was cool because that was it was one word, and it stood out. But if you go right back historically, we can go back to Ethel Gum. To the viewers and listeners, who's Ethel Gum? Of course, it's Judy Garland. Who is Anna Mae Bullock? Is of course Tina Turner, and the list goes on. Reginald Dwight. Elton. So I just thought I thought it was the de rigueur, you had to have a stage name. And so I was looking, well, I was a big fan of the Swedish group ABBA. Because in the UK, in my childhood, every single of those was number one. They were huge. 14 number ones, I think. Or 10. Anyway, I was a fan. I was reading an interview how they got their name, which was the first letter of each band member. So Anna, Benny, Bjorn, and the dark-haired girl is Anna Frida, but we all know her as Frida, of course, who had that great hit in the 80s produced by Phil Collins, I Know There's Something Going On. So I thought, I quite like that, playing around with the letters. So I looked at Limahl. Hamill is my family name. I took the double L at the end, I took one of the L's and put it at the front, and I read it backwards. I played around with it a little bit, and that's all I could come up with, just reading it backwards, and it said Limahl. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. I thought it sounded quite exotic, like a cocktail or something. Give me a Limahl on the rocks. So, I turned up at the Kajagoogoo band rehearsal and I told the guys, don't call me Chris from now on, I'm Limahl. And I have to admit, there was some sniggering, but thankfully it paid off.
Well, speaking of Kajagoogoo, the debut album was produced by Nick Rhodes of Duran Duran. How did he get involved and what was it like working with him?
He got involved because I was a waiter at a very cool nightclub in Old Bond Street, London, the Embassy Club. The Embassy Club always had paparazzi outside to catch the famous clientele. I saw Gary Newman in there. I saw the Bananarama Girls. I saw Lemmy from Motorhead. It was always on the slot machine. getting drunk, attacking the slot machine when he would lose money. Security would be called, but that's another story. Elton's manager, John Reid, was often in there. One night I served a drink to Nick Rhodes from Duran Duran, who was in there with one of his managers, Paul Barrow. The Duranis were managed by the Barrow brothers, who were the nightclub owners in Birmingham, the Rum Runner, where the band were discovered. And of course, I'm telling Nick, I'm a fan. I've just bought the Duran album, blah, blah, blah. I'm in a band too, and we've just recorded some demos and blah, blah, blah. To my surprise, he said, oh, well, why don't you send me your songs and I'll check them out, let you know what I think. So I did that. I sent him a cassette. He gave me an address. I sent a cassette. A week later, he called me. And I was living in West London at the time in Lancaster Gate. I'll never forget, there was a green phone on the wall, plastic, with one of them curly cords, cables that always got entangled. Picked up the phone. It was early afternoon, about 1 o'clock. And he said, hi, Limahl, I've got your tape. I really like the songs. I'm going to take them into EMI Records. And I had to pick myself up off the floor. I remember thinking, is this the break that we've been waiting for? You know, and it was. And so Nick not only helped us to get signed to EMI Records, he co-produced the album with Duran's producer, Colin Thurston, the late, sadly, Colin Thurston, I think, who did the first 3 Duran albums. So it was a bit like if you're going, now in the UK, the show is called, yes, in America, it's the Shark Tank, isn't it? It's a bit like going into the Shark Tank and getting 2 sharks instead of 1. So we had Nick Rhodes and we had Colin Thurston. And that's important because when you've got 5 members in a band and the guitarist wants the guitar louder and the drummer wants his snare louder, etc., you know, you need a good captain of the ship who can crack the whip and say, hey guys, get out the studio and let us do our job. So that's how Nick got involved. And of course, that's not a new precedent. You know, famously, Gladys Knight introduced the Jackson 5 to Motown. Andy Williams, the crooner, one of my favorite crooners, by the way, he helped to give the world the Osmonds. In the UK, Peter Gabriel of Genesis gave a helping hand to Kate Bush, who was a big star in Europe. I know in America she had a huge revival recently when they used her song in Stranger Things. But that's Kate Bush.
Well, the song Too Shy was a massive hit. What do you remember most about that moment when the song took off?
So many exciting moments, Steve. We were recording the album in a place called Chipping Norton Recording Studios in Oxfordshire, a beautiful country village. The single Too Shy came out in the UK in January 83. And a couple of weeks later, we got a call because we'd done some promo already. And, you know, there was great anticipation. And then we got the call to say, your single has gone into the UK chart, top 40 at number 33. And in 2 days, you've got to appear live on the most important music TV show of the time, Top of the Pops. And it was like Christmas morning, just kids unwrapping the best presents. We were all running around, excited, queuing up for the one landline telephone to call our friends and family and share the good news. And of course, once we did Top of the Pops, the single was the highest climber following week. So it went from 33 to 10, 10 to 5, 5 to 2, 2 to 1. And this was replicated across Europe and eventually America. So imagine, Steve, we're 23 years old and I'm suddenly, I'm from quite a poor background and I'm ringing my parents near Manchester saying, oh, I'm in Stockholm. Oh, I'm in Paris. We're doing a TV show. We're doing a press conference and blah, blah, blah. It was so exciting, the whole thing. And it was nice because there were five of us. We were like a family, and we'd worked really hard for this goal, you know. And the future looked bright and exciting, and we were young, and it was just wonderful.
You ended up leaving Kajagoogoo fairly early on in your career. What led to the split, and how did that shape your solo path?
So what happened was we played to 40,000 people in Finland on the Sunday. Huge event, probably like Glastonbury or something over there. And and then the next morning back in the UK, I got a phone call around 11 o'clock, and it was the manager of the band, so-called manager of the band, who was a friend of the band and didn't really have any business experience. And he said, Limahl, we're all here. We're having a meeting. We've decided to do the next album without you. It was a total shock, out of the blue. No discussion, no 3 strikes and you're out. Not even a heated debate. I was so baffled. I felt so betrayed. I always like to point that out because I think it could be construed as being egotistical to leave a band, especially at such an early stage. I had no choice but to go solo. I certainly know that the record company desperately tried to keep the whole thing together, but the problem was, you see, the band were a 4-piece and had been together for 3 years. I was an outsider, and publicly at the time they stated it was musical differences. They didn't like being a teeny band, and of course I pointed out since that the Beatles were a teeny band, Wham were a teeny band, Duran, in fact, had lots of screaming girls in the beginning. You know, I think it was commercial suicide for them, and it will always be a big what if in my life. People ask me, do I have any regrets? And that's one of them. I regret that I never got the opportunity to do a second or third album with Kajagoogoo, because I looked hard to find a good band, to find good musicians, to find talent. And I was thrilled when I discovered them, or we discovered each other, should I say. I was auditioned by them, and they hired me, so to speak. And then I lived with a bass player and his girlfriend for 18 months, and we wrote songs and recorded demos, and we did gigs. I really felt that we were a family, and I also felt that I was very instrumental in the success of the band, because it was a friend of mine at the time who invested £10,000 in new equipment that bought us all the latest synthesizers. And so our demos suddenly went, well, we sounded like our contemporaries, which was Human League, Depeche Mode, Eurythmics. And I think without that equipment, those demos would not have interested Nick Rhodes. It was devastating for me to get that call.
So your Kajagoogoo bandmate, Nick Biggs, has been touring and working with Howard Jones. Howard has worked in the song Too Shy in his set list and his live shows. What are your thoughts on them performing your iconic Kajagoogoo song?
I think it's a great thing. I'll tell you why. For years, Nick was a bit dismissive of Kajagoogoo. He thought it was beneath him. Maybe that was his way of dealing with the split. Maybe it was his way of dealing with, excess emotional baggage. He wouldn't sometimes refer to it in a sort of jokingly manner, slightly sarcastic. So I think it's wonderful to see him embracing his legacy. And I'm a fan of Howard Jones. And Nick is a great bass player. And his bass on that track is iconic. The musicianship of Kajagoogoo is why I joined the band. I recognized something in their talent, in their energy. Hey, I packed my suitcase, phoned my theatre agent and said, don't ring me anymore, I'm leaving London. I left, I just got up and moved to Leighton Buzzard, this town 50 miles north of London. That was my determination. And I had been looking for musicians. I was in and out of a couple of bands, but I went for it. And so I always try to remember that, so it's great. I haven't heard it. I can imagine it's quite charming, I'm not quite sure how they're doing it, but I've seen and heard lots of good feedback on social media, and I'm all for it. I mean, if Howard wants to release a version of it as a co-writer, I benefit from that. That's fine by me. No, I'm totally fine with it. It's I think about 10 years ago, a rap duo who'd been signed to a record company in America had sampled some of Too Shy, and it was interesting. There was some singing, there was some rapping, but it wasn't a hit. I can't remember what the act was called. I mean, the song was used in American Horror Story season 9, episode 7 and 8, and they actually had a Kajagoogoo as part of the storyline. That was brilliant. My 2 nephews were very excited about that in the UK. Black Mirror also used Too Shy. There was another big film on, was it called Serena on Netflix? They used Too Shy in that. So yeah, I'm all for it. It keeps the interest in the song, keeps the interest in Kajagoogoo, keeps the interest in me. It all kind of goes full circle. It's funny, I'm not curious enough to search it out online to listen to it yet. Maybe there's just a little bit of emotional baggage there in the way. I'm happy to hear and talk about it, but actually listen to it, I haven't done that yet. However, there's a great irony here. If I hadn't been fired by Kajagoogoo, would I have been given the opportunity to perform a song that's become even more important across the world for me, for my work, for my career, for my legacy, which is the Neverending Story movie soundtrack? Before we get to that, your question about my solo work, it's a very different dynamic. Suddenly I had to find session musicians and find producers and work in a very different scenario with a different energy. And so that was exciting, and it was also scary at the same time. I rose to the challenge. EMI Records asked me to go off to Tokyo to perform at the Tokyo Music Festival at the Budokan Hall in Tokyo, which is a huge televised event. And while I was there, I met Giorgio Moroder, who was also there. And that's how that came about. I'm sorry if I preempted one of your other questions. I'm sure you were probably going to get to Neverending Story, but
yeah, one of my questions was, how did you get involved with being on the soundtrack for the Neverending Story?
Yeah, so I met Giorgio in Tokyo, and he liked Too Shy. I've seen him in an interview. He's with his charming Italian accent. I like this song, Shy, Shy. He's a terrible singer, for a 3 Academy Award-winning music producer. Yeah, Giorgio liked Too Shy, and there was a connection, in Tokyo. And when I got back to the UK, I got the call to try my voice. That's how I was told. It's kind of an audition, I guess. I don't know who else he was trying. But anyway, I flew to Munich. We did the vocal in the evening, nailed it about 8 o'clock. But the funny story is, over the years, I get asked, did you have any idea how successful Neverending Story was going to be? Because outside of America, it was #1 in 17 countries. It was huge. And it's still huge. And people say to me, did you know it was going to be such a big hit? I say, if I'd have known, I would have gone to bed at 7 p.m. But instead, being 24 years old, I was out nightclubbing, smoking cigarettes, drinking alcohol, got to bed at 4 a.m. The flight was at 9 a.m. I almost missed the flight. I got to Munich. I couldn't sing a note because my voice was going, We tried my voice in the afternoon and it just wasn't working. And I remember saying to Giorgio, no, I said, I sing in the evening. I'm an evening singer. We'll get it tonight. And that's what happened.
So did the success of the Neverending Story change the kind of artist you wanted to be, or the way the industry saw you?
Well, there's an expression, you're only as good as your last hit. that was very important for the perception of me as a solo artist, not just to the media, but to the record company, the investors, really. Your record company are your investor. I mean, obviously, they're hoping in the long run that this is a good investment for them. They throw a big team behind you and they've got their budgets. And that's a wonderful thing if you're signed to a major, or indeed any record company. And back in those days, there were about 40 different independent record companies you could go to in London to look for a record deal. And the sad state of affairs is that most of those have been swallowed up now by the four conglomerates: Warner, Sony, Universal, and BMG. So it's very, very difficult. But thankfully, we've got other ways to get our music out there, like YouTube and the streaming sites. And that's exactly what I'm doing with my new single.
Yeah, I'm going to get to that new single in shortly. But I'm going to also ask you about your debut solo album, Don't Suppose, came out right after your time with Kajagoogoo. What was your mindset going into that record?
Oh, gosh, I was very incentivized, you know, because I had what's the expression? I had a point to prove, you know, and certainly to the band. The band thing was like, it's like being dumped by someone you're still in love with. What you really want is for them to see you with your new lover as you walk down the street. So you can go, nah, 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 nah. You dumped me, but look, I'm okay. You know, I think everyone can relate to that. I had to look for a new manager, and of course they have an input. Then there were discussions with my A&R guy at EMI, a guy called Dave Ambrose, about what direction to take, who the producer should be. But it was all kind of exciting, and going in different recording studios. And I'm always very open to suggestions, and I believe in teamwork and collaborations. I mean, if you look over the years, some of the best work has been collaborations. Collaborating is great because it can be a solitary work, you know. Even songwriting, I prefer it doing it with someone, because in the tea break, you've got someone to chat to, you know. I always think it must be difficult for book writers, you know. I think if you're writing a script, there's usually one or two people. I always think that must be fun. Or I always think it must be the greatest fun being a script writer for a comedy TV show. If you imagine, I don't know, Friends, or one of my favorite old TV shows, this is The Golden Girls. I love that show. There's a joke about every 3-4 lines. It's just laughter, laughter, laughter about these 4 old dears living in Florida. And they repeat those shows forever. It must have been such fun in that writing room. But anyway, yeah, so I do like collaborating. A very collaborative process, very open to suggestions. Dee Harris and Tim Palmer came on board to produce, and Tim has actually gone on to do some really significant work. He lives in Atlanta, actually, although he's British. He lives in near Atlanta, I believe, in America with his family. And yeah, we've got I've some fond memories of working with those guys. And it was nice. Everybody was anticipating my new work. So the album did about 500,000 across Europe.
Tracks like Only for Love, and Too Much Trouble have aged really well. Are there any deep cuts on Don't Suppose that you wish maybe had gotten more attention?
We never got to it, but I always thought I Was a Fool could be a good single.
So out of control. I was a fool to have fallen for you. I was foolish to fall. Yes, I was a fool to have fallen.
Yeah, I Was a Fool. Another song I like on the first album is Oh Girl.
Girl, you know what's best for me. Your body told me, and I agree. Girl, you know how to treat me right. Your lips have told me so. Tonight, oh girl.
Because I love that synthesizer line that answers the vocal in the verse. That was played by Dee Harris. So I would like to talk with you, and the synth goes da 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 da. Beautiful. I haven't played it for a long time. Maybe I will after this chat.
One of your albums that I really enjoyed was Color All My Days. The production on that album to me seemed very polished, kind of more of a synth pop sound. How were you involved in shaping that direction of that album?
So what happened, Steve? It made sense to do an album after the success of Neverending Story. It made sense to do an album with Giorgio Moroder. Strangely, I said to my manager, Billy Gaff, at the time, who had worked with Rod Stewart and various others, I said, I'd like to work with these guys, two American guys. I really like their work, called Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis. And in his Irish accent, Billy said something along the lines of, you're fucking working with Giorgio Moroder. You just sold 4 million fucking singles with him. Something like that. I've never heard of them. He'd never heard of Jam and Lewis, but I was a big fan of the Change album. You see, I love R&B pop. I always have. I grew up on Motown. So R&B pop, soul, it's kind of in my DNA, really. I mean, I didn't have a problem working with Giorgio at all. I think I would have been happy to split some of the production up, so Giorgio would do maybe like 5 tracks and try a couple of tracks with Jam and Lewis, maybe a couple of tracks with someone else. But anyway, that's the way it worked out. Giorgio was an absolute joy to work with, because you're talking about a guy who has had so much success, is so comfortable in his own skin. The Donna Summer stuff, the Academy Award for the Midnight Express movie soundtrack, and later, of course, Top Gun soundtrack, or the theme song, and the theme song from Flashdance What a Feeling with Irene Cara. Yeah, Giorgio was successful. He was on a roll. It was a pleasure to be around. He was relaxed. He had a charming accent. He was fond of me. And in Munich, everybody knew him. It was just, wherever you went, the people would be waving. He always seemed to have a stunning female on his arm. He knew lots of stunning females. What a great reputation to have. And I think what I learned from Giorgio was appreciating that his success was down to a team. He led the team, but he had his engineers that he preferred. He had his musicians that he preferred. And believe me, as a 24-year-old, I wasn't going to get in his way. And funnily enough, he sent me instrumentals of a few of the tracks to write lyrics to. And when I arrived in Munich, I was suggesting all these things. And I made some changes to the melodies that he'd suggested, just part of the creative process. I just wanted to suggest them, but a couple of times he wasn't having it. And I wasn't going to question him. I said, fine, Giorgio, whatever you think. Generally, my memories of working with Giorgio are great, absolutely great. And when I left Munich, when the album was done, he sent his chauffeured car He had a driver. I seem to think it was a Rolls Royce or a Bentley. Turned up at my hotel with a gift box, gift wrapped, big box, quite heavy, and a card. And I opened it, and inside this box were about 20 more individually wrapped little packages. And every one of them was a top brand men's cologne or aftershave. And the card said, Limahl, it's been a pleasure working with you. Don't ever change. As I say, it was a great time. And I really think it was a privilege to work with such a legend, such a pioneer.
Well, the lead single on that album, Love in Your Eyes,
Love in your eyes is the reason why. Holding a secret, a certain price. Love in your eyes is the flame that makes me feel so warm inside.
was big in parts of Europe. Did you expect it to resonate in more certain regions than others?
I think the success of the two solo albums, but especially Love in Your Eyes, I was disappointed. I thought that it should have done better. I've since learned that there was an internal restructuring at EMI in the UK, and within that, my album got kind of caught up. And this is not an uncommon story. I've heard this before. I was just unlucky in that sense. But at least the recordings are there, and they are appreciated by some. And I'm proud of the work. That's the important thing.
Well, another song that really stuck out to me was Inside to Outside.
Keep a hold on your desire, but I feel there's something new, and it's lying in your eyes. There's a shudder running through you. Now I realize inside turning to outside. The feeling you can't hide is touching a highlight in your eyes. Inside turning to outside. It's gonna be alright. It's running a high for you and
To me, I felt like it had a very sleek, pop forward production. What inspired that song, and was there a story behind recording it?
I honestly think you could release Inside to Outside today, and it could be a hit with a sort of retro twist, because there is a appetite in certain areas of life. There's an appetite for antiques. It's an antique. It's a recording that's 3 years old. That song wasn't written by me, and it wasn't written by Giorgio. It came to Giorgio, and he liked it, and he signed it to his publishing company. He told me that he really liked the song and he wanted to record it, and I said fine, because I trusted his judgment. Then, when it came to releasing it as a single, I suggested to EMI that they do a remix by these two Dutch producers whose work I'd become aware of, who just had a top 10 hit in the UK with a 3-girl group from the Netherlands called Mai Tai. It was a kind of chic, inspired, and that sort of tempo. The song was called History by Mai Tai. EMI agreed, and so the master tapes went off to the Netherlands, to Amsterdam, to Eric Van Tijn and Jochem Floutsma, who did a splendid remix. I loved it. But again, EMI didn't really get behind it. They didn't even make a video. Such was their lack of commitment. And again, really, the track got lost. So I have I've got a small relationship now with Warner Music, who acquired EMI when EMI was sold. The UK Government Monopolies Commission said that when EMI was sold, they had to break up the publishing and the recording side. So EMI publishing was sold to Sony, and EMI Records were sold to Warner. So I've got a relationship with the heritage music side of Warner, which is called Rhino Records. And I have suggested that they look at the Color All My Days album and pointed out that single, and maybe this conversation we're having now, it might be a good time to reconnect with them. Because at the moment, I've had a lot of PR in the UK for my latest single. I've been on national TV and some very important media. So, you know, maybe now's the time to strike while the iron is hot, as we say, because that would be amazing. It's not unknown for something like that to happen. I think a few years ago, I don't know why it happened. Was it using a TV commercial? There was an old recording of Elton John and the Spinners. What was the song called? Let me think. It was called Are You Ready? Are You Ready for Love? Something like that. I think it's called Are You Ready for Love? I'm getting the melody wrong. I'm not doing it any justice. But yeah, it became top 10. Okay, I can't compare myself with Elton John or indeed the Spinners, who are Motown legends. But, you know, things can happen. Let's see. Watch this space, folks.
Well, one other song on that album I just have to ask you about is Love Will Tear the Soul.
Love will tear the soul, confuse the mind, till you finally leave it all behind.
To me, it's such poetic and maybe an introspective track. What can you tell me about that one?
Well, you know, in life, you have to have lived to be able to write certain lyrics. I had my heart broken from the age of 18 to 30. A few times. Maybe 3 very significantly. I think I was always looking for love. Could the next person be Mr. or Mrs. Right? In my case, it was Mr. Right, because I realized I was gay at the age of, I probably fully accepted it around the age of 18. Before that, I just wasn't quite sure. I did date girls, and it's odd. I don't know how it happened. I don't believe you choose to be gay. It's just there within you. So a lot of the gay activists will say it's our choice. Well, I don't think it is a choice, and I know a lot of others say that. It's just there. It's weird, you know. So there were experiences with guys, and one day I fell in love. It completely caught me by surprise. And then I was shocked. I was like, oh, this is a really powerful feeling. I must be one of those. Oh, it was terrifying. I ran away from home at 16 because I didn't want my dad to find out. Anyway, I digress. You know, with a broken heart a few times. I think, you know, I was rejected at school. I was bullied. I was a bit different. I wasn't the usual kind of young guy. I wasn't particularly sporty. I was more arty. And my dad was a bit of a bully. I think my dad saw something in me he didn't like. And so I think in one sense, and I'm going deeply psychological now, I think and I haven't seen a therapist, I probably should. I've worked it out for myself. It's cheaper. I think I was looking for male affirmation, you know, approval. And so I was always, I think that was part and parcel of looking for another guy that liked me, I guess, as much as maybe I would like them, in just the same way that it would happen in the heterosexual world. I think that's where Love Will Tear the Soul. I think the lyrics, and I love what Giorgio Moroder did with that production. It's dramatic, you know. So I think it required a word like soul, and it's true. Love will tear the soul, confuse your mind, till you finally leave it all behind. I'm quoting my own lyric, and I'm not quite sure if I'm 100% correct because I haven't said them for a long time. But I do like that track. I'm glad you pointed it out.
Well, you've stayed active with music. You've released several singles in the last few years, such as Still in Love.
My life is in free fall. Still in love with you.
Your new single is a cover of A Horse with No Name. By America. What drew you to that song in particular?
I've always loved that song, Steve. It's kind of been in my life as long as I can remember. I just find it very comforting. I don't know why. I don't have a very specific memory. I just always know that it's a song I will go to. And when I was buying my first records, 71, 72, that was one I purchased. I think in the back of my mind, it was always a challenge. And then I'd go, my other voice would, the reasoning voice would go, maybe you shouldn't. It's very special. It's a classic. How dare you, you know? But in the end, I gave in to the artistic side. I thought, let's have a go. Let's see what we can do. It may not have worked out. I think that was what drove me. I thought, well, look, if it's no good, I'll just put it on the shelf, you know, the way you do. All creatives, whether you're writing a book, writing a script for a film, making music, you know, we've all got unfinished ideas. I remember reading an interview with George Michael and Barry Gibb of the Bee Gees saying exactly the same thing. And my shelf is full of them. They're never wasted. Sometimes they come in handy. You always keep them because there might be an 8-bar section that could be used somewhere in the future.
I was curious, was there any other classic tracks that maybe made your short list before you chose the song by America?
The cover version that I was going to do was only going to be a Horse with No Name. It wasn't, my remit wasn't, oh, I must do a cover version. My remit was, I'd like to have a look at this song. Because lyrically, it's so unique. And of course, in my research, I've discovered that the writer, Dewey Bunnell, his father was stationed in an Air Force base near the two deserts, and he had all these memories of the deserts. And of course, I'm from Manchester in the UK. We don't have any deserts in that area. I was never going to write this song. So, I think lyrically, that's half the appeal of the song, you know. And it's so unusual. It just kind of chugs along like a train. Although my treatment of it is a little bit different.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to bring up. I really enjoyed how your version of the song came across. It's not a straight cover. You put your own spin on it. And to me, that's really what actually really pulled me in more than my familiarity with the song. I really enjoyed also how you mixed that chorus with the la la la. La 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 la.
So that was the important thing for me. I had to put my own stamp on it. And so initially I thought, well, I can't use guitars because the original is full of this lovely acoustic guitar. And so I start with all the electronics, which is kind of going back to the synthesizer and what I'm known for. I got this really great Jupiter 8 sound. Roland Jupiter 8 was a fantastic synth invented around 1980. And actually, there's one on stage in the Too Shy video. Our keyboard player, Stuart, is stood in front of a Roland Jupiter 8. Now, of course, you can get it as a plug-in in audio software. And that's how I was working it. Then I put on this envelope on the sound. So you get like a wah-wah guitar that opens and closes. You get the but as a musical chord. And I've got that coming back to me. This really interesting, I think it's 6/8, the rhythm. So almost like the same sort of rhythm as Everybody Wants to Rule the World, Tears for Fears. I think there's a famous Michael Jackson song in 6/8 and several others. So it's tick, 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 tick. And it was kind of, it made it easy for me, and it also kept me interested because I'm listening to it thinking, oh, this is very nice. And so, yeah, it's just a process of elimination, of trying things. It's very organic. That's not working. That's working. But then here's the funny thing. I did a TV show in the UK with a famous girl singer here called Jane McDonald. And Channel 5 gave her 2 TV series, and she was singing and having guests on. And she invited me to sing The Never-Ending Story on her show. And while I was there, I had to rehearse with her band. And I met the guitarist Steve Cooper, who's worked with Lionel Richie and all sorts of people. So I said to Steve, look, I'm going to send you this track. So we're talking by email. I said, look, I want to try some guitar on this track. I don't know if I'm going to use it, but if I don't use it, don't be offended. I will still pay you, you know. So just throw some ideas down. And then he sent me the files back, and I was blown away. And as I spent about 2 weeks editing that guitar. I couldn't hear it for a while. I was so close to it. My partner, Steve, and my sister, Caroline, were both saying, this is amazing. You've got to release it. And I still couldn't. You know, it's a bit like the artist doing a painting. You know, you're so close to it. You're doing it. You can't see it anymore. Or in my case, you can't hear it anymore. So it was in and out of my back pocket for a while. And then eventually I started to hear it and think, yes, this is okay. And this is... this is not going to get me sent to prison by the rock and roll community. And the icing on the cake was working on the video with these crazy words and this fun production. So the whole project has really been a labor of love in the end.
So I have to ask, with this single coming out, is this more of a one-off single, or is this maybe part of an upcoming project? Maybe we might get a new solo album in the works?
The reaction to A Horse With No Name has been so good. My 2 singles in 2020, the pandemic year, when everybody, including myself, had lots of free time. So so this is the 3rd single I've done in 5 years. I do have some very good stuff in my back pocket, and I think I keep saying it, so it might happen. I think I'm going to have a new album ready either 2026 or early 2027. I'm going to take my time and get it right. It might be my last album because I'm not getting any younger. But of course, you should never say never in life because it comes back to bite you. But at the moment, that is the plan, to put another album together, which will be my first album in, I don't know, 30 years or something, which is a scary thought. I don't know if anyone would be interested. You know, it's weird. But judging by look, Steve, I'm basically like an antique. If you have a vase from 1950, it's now got more value. Things as they get older they seem to gain value. Classic cars, you know, etc. This word classic keeps coming up regarding me, the 80s and stuff like that. So, you know, maybe and of course, you've got very popular shows like Stranger Things, totally introducing 80s music to a new generation. And the streams of Never-Ending Story are 2 million a month since that show, as it went global. But here's the trick. Here's the tricky thing. You know, if I do a new album, it's not going to sound 80s. It's just me that's from the 80s. So that's an interesting conundrum. And we'll see what happens.
Well, Limahl, it's been an absolute pleasure to be able to speak with you. The new single, A Horse With No Name, like I said, is fantastic. It's available on all the streaming sites, the digital sites. YouTube is a great video. I don't know if there's any physical singles available.
Well, look, Steve, I'm a one-man operation, you know. And so what I try to do is the minimum to get stuff out there, but reduce as much admin as possible. Yes, I'd love to do vinyl. Yes, I'd love to do CDs, physical product. Maybe that will come later. We'll see. But at the moment, there's so much work involved in just producing the music and making the video. And then in all 3 singles, I've hired a PR company and a radio promotion company, and I've done lots of interviews, try and get the music out there. It's hard when you're up against the big guys, you know, the conglomerates that I referred to earlier. But thankfully, there is a more discerning audience looking away from that brings us to places like this, which is fantastic.
Again, best of luck with it. I really am looking forward to the next solo album, maybe 26, maybe 27. I wish you all the success in the world. And thanks again for stopping by to chat with us.
Oh, you're welcome, Steve. Thank you, Steve. All the best.
If this is your first time listening, we thank you and ask that you please subscribe. That's a great way to support us. And if you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to leave us a 5-star review. You can find us on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. Just search for New Wave Music Podcast. We'll catch you on the next episode.